Hello everyone, I'm MIKOTO YAMAZOE. Have you ever thought about your own personality? Do you think you are outgoing, talkative, and optimistic? If so, you may be called an extrovert. Or maybe you think you are the opposite, shy, quiet, and passive. If the answer is yes, you are probably someone called an introvert. But what exactly do extroversion and introversion mean? Let me explain. Generally speaking, extroverts tend to be outgoing, while introverted people are often considered as shy. The idea of extroversion and introversion was first introduced by a very famous psychologist, Carl Jung, about 100 years ago. So, this idea is not a new one. According to his theory, most people can be put into one of these two groups, either extrovert or introvert. These personality types have been known to have effect on various aspects of life, including mental health, language learning, and jobs. So today, I'd like to talk about their characteristics, their differences, and how we should face our own personalities. First, let's take a look at both of these personality types in more detail. I mentioned earlier that extroverts are often known as outgoing and introverts as shy. However, the psychological meaning is that extroverts gain energy from being around and spending time with other people. On the other hand, introverts prefer spending time alone. Extroverts tend to like human interaction. They enjoy talking with friends, going to parties, or working in groups. Also, it is their strength. They are good at having a conversation, which often makes them appear friendly. In contrast, introverts feel more comfortable doing individual activities such as reading, writing, and listening to music. Unfortunately, these features often make them look antisocial. However, in my opinion, the personality type is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, a lot of research done on the relationships between introversion and mental well-being. According to the research, introverts have a greater risk of suffering from depression. Based on what I have found, there are basically two main reasons. First, since they like to spend time by themselves, they tend to think and analyze too much. This can lead to developing negative emotions. Secondly, they can get stressed from spending a long time with other people. But communication is really important in our society, so they could feel depressed easily. Extroverts, however, tend to get stressed when they are alone. According to a recent study, I found that more and more extroverts have had stronger feeling of depression during the corona pandemic. Of course, this is due to a lack of opportunity to meet people, because they gain energy from human interaction. I think the best way to remain mentally strong is to balance the time you spend by themselves and the time you spend mixing with people. With a good balance, both extrovert and introvert can have fulfilling social lives. Let me move on to my next point. How these personality types affect us in our daily lives. These personality types are also connected to learning a new language. Which personality type do you think is better at learning a second language? I think most of us would guess that extroverts are better at it, because they have a good communication skill. However, this is not necessarily true. We know from research that different personality types learn a new language in different ways. Introverts tend to focus on input. so they learn grammar and vocabulary faster than the extrovert. On the other hand, extroverts tend to practice their speaking skills by talking in social situations, which means they are better at output. Also, they speak a language without fear of making mistakes, which helps them improve their speaking skill much more quickly. Therefore, one is not better than the other when it comes to learning a new language. I believe that understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are is the first step in being able to improve your language skills. Lastly, let's talk about suitable jobs for each personality types. What kind of jobs are best for extrovert and introvert? Of course, it is important that people have jobs that they are good at, because it is proven that job satisfaction is much higher in people who do the job they enjoy. First, extrovert. Actually, they have a high possibility to perform well through cooperation and competition at work. Because as I mentioned earlier, they are good at different things. They are good at communication with others. Also, it is their strength to be able to get along with people, with many different kinds of people. So, they are suited to a job where they can have many opportunities to work and cooperate with others. For example, many extroverted people work well as event planners or in sales. But how about introvert? Well, they tend to do well in jobs when they are alone. For example, in a quiet environment rather than working with others. As I mentioned before, human interaction can make them feel tired or even stressed. So, a workplace in which they can work in their own pace would be more comfortable for them. On the other hand, they also have some strengths. One is that they tend to study and examine things until they understand clearly. Also, they are very creative and good at explaining in a way that's easy to understand. With these skills, many introverted people often take jobs in marketing, publishing contents, or jobs connected to IT. So far, I have explained about two personality types, extrovert and introvert. As I have shown today, extrovert and introvert just do things differently. The way they live is a little bit different from each other's. Their mental well-being, the way they learn, the way they work are just different. Of course, one is not better than the others. In fact, this idea of extroversion versus introversion is for some starting to get a little outdated. It is perhaps wrong to say that it is just like being black and white, that one is the opposite of the others. So, have you ever heard of the word ambivert? Imagine personality as a balance with introversion at one end and extroversion at the other. An ambivert could be considered as being in the space in the middle, having a little bit of both personality types. Despite Carl Jung's idea, recent studies show that most people are actually ambivert. They show characteristics of both extroversion and introversion depending on the situation. They are often referred as outgoing introvert or antisocial extrovert. For example, someone who enjoys spending time with others but sometimes needed to be alone. In conclusion, whether you think you are extroverted or introverted, please don't feel bad. As I just said, one is not better than the others, just different. Also, introverts shouldn't try being extrovert, and extroverts shouldn't try to change and become introvert. because they are good at different things, and there is no better or worse. In fact, it's not always black and white, as most people are ambivert. So don't compare yourselves. Just be you. Thank you for listening.